Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery and crack. Welcome to episode 3 of season 2, which is about the drink.
But at a certain point, about 2 years ago, I looked back on my relationships with a lot of my very close friends, the people I'm closest to and very, very much rely on, have seen me through very dark times. And I was like, all of my closest, warmest, most important memories with these men, we are drunk. 95% of those memories was seen through a haze of alcohol. And I was like, I didn't like the idea of having to drink in order to access that closeness and support. Because what I found with men, with Irish men, is that they wanted to get to that place. They wanted to get to that place of honesty and affection and support, but you needed a huge feed of pints. You know, a huge feed of pints first.
It's all content, baby.
It's
Good
all
morning.
content, baby. Bart started talking before I hit recording.
Yeah, he's like, stop. We need it.
No.
We need your words of wisdom.
We need to bring every drop of content out of our relationship.
Yeah, so we're that made me sad. It's not true. It's not true.
It's all a product, Bart.
Oh, you're breaking my heart.
Yeah. As long as it's profitable.
Yeah, the capitalist O'Connor.
The capitalist heartbreak.
Exactly. So we're trying to do this like with a clean start instead of where Anthony sneaks up on me with pressing record. So let's see how that goes. Last week's topic was conflict, but it didn't make it to the podcast.
It didn't.
And it did make it to live. No, we didn't.
That would have been good.
We didn't fight,
content.
but it felt conflictuous.
Yeah, I couldn't. I've had a few little health bits, nothing major. Like I had the tooth, and then I had a bad sore throat, and it was really funny that I had something I was wound up about, and I was like, oh, we'll go through it on the pod, and we'll do the episode about conflict because that was. The thing I was actually wound up about was a situation in which somebody was so terrified of conflict that they were going to like these madder and madder ends to avoid conflict. Yeah. And I was like, conflict's not that bad. That was the core of it. But what often happens with me is like if I don't always practice what I preach, and if I have something to say and I'm like, oh, this is going to create a bit of conflict. Oftentimes I'm like, I'll say it in a minute, and then I'll just be like, oh God, and it'll all just come out at once, you know. So you were on the receiving end of that. Yeah.
And it was so gentle. It was so gentle. Anthony does this thing. I don't know if you mind me saying it, but otherwise you can cut it out. But he does this thing where he goes, right, you're a lovely lad, you're my good friend, I just need to say this. And I'm like, oh no, like I can feel my balls clenching, going like, oh no, I'm going to get it. Okay, Bart, keep your heart open. He's going to tell you some harsh truths, but they're truths you need to hear. So just stay with it. And then it's like, oh, I would just like to do this differently. And I'm like, yeah, and when is the punch? When is the punch coming? When are you going to kill me? And it's like, it's fine. You're too careful.
So we're not doing conflict because, frankly, I was in a bit of a mood for better part of a week, and I had the tooth thing before then, and I was just like, I don't think there's any way. I think we will talk about conflict, but that's just.
And we'll be roaring as well.
We'll do it like we'll do it while wrestling. Sorry, I just remember I watched a Brazilian jiu-jitsu tutorial one time where what's her name? She's the Welsh BJJ champion. She's phenomenal. Anyway, she was doing an instructional video. So she's there in the gi with her partner, and she's like rolling and tumbling and grappling and talking through these BJJ submissions. But the person who recorded it decided to put a lapel mic on her. So
wow, that's
all you can hear is like, and then grab his collar and audio matters, people. Audio matters. Don't use a lapel mic on a martial artist.
Lapel mics are that's making me think of something now. They're insane, like, because you hear horrible things. What was I listening to? I don't remember. I was thinking this morning about sorry, this is just sidestep, but you were talking about content, and I sent you that video of, Garen Noon, the Mayo guy, who I think is very dry and very funny.
Yeah,
He was just like, So my videos have been taken are being taken off Instagram because they're not family friendly enough because I say cunt a lot. But you have to understand it's not as bad a word in Ireland. But sure, listen, I'm bowing down to the man. So I won't do it again. And now today we're going to talk about Irish slang. So you can call someone a cunt or a cunt or a cunt. And I was like, good man, Garen.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking like he's obviously, making a profitable career from what he's doing. So why are we demonetizing ourselves before we got monetized? Like, so much swearing.
Because I think we wouldn't be able to communicate honestly if
Well
we were watching
done.
our language.
Oh, well
but it's true, and swearing is part of Irish slang. But
I think feckin' is the funniest thing.
Oh, when
because it's like people need fucking for emphasis.
Yeah.
And then we're like, well, it's too rude, but we can't go without it. So we'll just replace one letter and pretend like
But
it's fine.
they still beeped Cillian Murphy's was it his BAFTA or his Oscar speech?
And he only said feckin'.
He said feckin', yeah. Do you know what I miss? I don't know if you probably remember this part, but like if somebody would be like, "Oh, sugar." Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I know a few people still around here who do that. Yeah.
And like if you're feeling a bit posh, it could be, "Oh, shukra."
Oh, hello. Hello. But
I love that because it's like the swear word has made it like all the way to your
and you're
upper
just like,
larynx.
I'm holding on.
And you just have to, and it's sugar.
What was the thing in Battlestar Galactica?
Frack. And then there was like Bill Adama's shaving mirror.
Yeah.
It was an IKEA mirror called Frack.
That's cool. Yeah, that was so weird that for that show, they were just like, we need this to be edgy, but not too edgy. We'll have to work around it. Listen, sometimes it creates great art.
It does.
And sometimes it creates frack.
Yeah. So, great show, though. Great show. So,
Really
I was thinking about conflict and just thinking that we will do it at some stage, but
we will do it drunk.
We'll do it drunk and fighty. And I don't think there's a need.
Making a bridge.
I know. I'm not ready for the bridge.
Oh, okay.
Give me another like 8 bars. But
yes, Eminem. Go on.
But yeah, I don't think there's a way to do that isn't a bit heavy. So we're going to talk about something that is probably, I don't know, in the middle.
Halfway
maybe
heavy.
we would call it.
Can be heavy. Can be.
And it is part of, at least on my end, in a way, part of the genesis of the story of the podcast as well. So we're going to talk about the drink, not coffee. What do you call coffee? The other drug or something?
Oh yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
I quite like that.
Yeah, the other drug.
Well, it 100% is. Like, I come in every episode recording morning, and Anthony's like, "Do you need coffee?" And I'm like, I don't need it, but I do want it.
If somebody hesitates when you offer them coffee, you just give them coffee, especially if you're about to put a microphone in front of them for an hour and a half.
Be awake.
Yeah. So, before I tell that story, what's your relationship like with drink, Bart? We are talking about booze, obviously. We're talking about hooch. We're talking about ethanol. We're talking about...
I think it might have to be your story first.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. Well, I started drinking when I was 15, which within my friend group and at that time in rural Ireland was late.
Yeah.
Like I knew a lot of people that were drinking from 10. And it was a social thing for me initially, but then like all teenagers, just reckless, like you just like, I don't know what it's like in Holland. I think you guys are a little bit more on the continent. You're a little bit more able to handle the drink a little bit better, but like, excuse me, in like at that time, and you'd just be doing shots and just getting as drunk as you can, as quickly as you can, and everyone's doing it, so it's like quote unquote fine. And then I moved to China and being part of an expat community, horrible word, but like a group of foreigners in another country, you bond over drink. That's how you meet 100%. People, and you drink a lot. I remember I once drank I went out 11 nights in a row, and shit booze as well, like bathtub liquor in Shanghai at that time. Came home, I was in college, and then I went back to China for a couple of years, and again, bonding over drink. And by now I'm in like my mid-20s. Then I worked on cruise ships for a while. Again, a very, very boozy time. I remember I was my working hours were determined by the itinerary. So we had one day where we docked really early. We docked at 7 a.m. and then we sailed at like 5 p.m. and then all the evening entertainment started at, let's say, 7:30. So basically, nobody would come to see me most of the day. So I was actually only working from like 4 until 8 p.m. that day. So I would get off the ship and I would have lunch and I'd have a few beers with lunch, get a bit of a buzz on, sober up, come back on the ship, work for 4 hours and then go out. And I was like, why am I feeling so bad? And you're like, you're getting drunk twice a day at the moment, you know. And again, everyone is doing it around you. And then, yeah, as you get older, the hangovers get worse and the fun is not as much, but like it can become just a habit. I remember like I found myself in a group of people that I wasn't particularly friendly with. Like they were kind of friends of friends and like one person I kind of knew and his mates. And I just realized, oh my God, we just go out and get drunk every Friday. And there's no reason for it. And I'm not particularly close to these people, but that's just what's done. And like that was a big thing in their weekend is like you finish the job, you go out drinking. So anyway, there was all that, and I could keep going on. But at a certain point, about 2 years ago, I looked back on my relationships with a lot of my very close friends, and I looked back, and they're very, very, you know who you are, like my absolute brothers, like the people I'm closest to and very, very much rely on, have seen me through very dark times. And I was like, all of my closest, warmest, most important memories with these men, we are drunk. Every single one of those memories, 95% of those memories was seen through a haze of alcohol. And I was like, I didn't like the idea of having to drink in order to access that closeness and support, because what I found with Irish men, is that they wanted to get to that place. They wanted to get to that place of honesty and affection and support, but you needed a huge feed of pints, a huge feed of pints first. And I was just like, no. So at this stage, I was drinking very little. Actually, since I've been about 30, it's rare that I would have more than 2 pints, maybe 3 pints on a night out. But to go from that to 0 was actually a
bigger step,
huge step for me. And I remember sitting down with you in December a couple of years ago, and you had a pint, and I was like, I'm not, I'm not now. And I remember that was the start of it. And one thing, and I'll say this is be my final point for the time being, but one of the things that gave me confidence to stop drinking, because one thing I was afraid of was that I'd lose my friends. And I was like, we were hanging out more at that stage, and I was like, I reckon I can get to that place of closeness and support with Bart without booze. Like, I don't know if we'd done it yet, but I was like, I feel like that's accessible without alcohol. So I'm going to cut it. So I cut it for a while, and just to let you know where I am now, I have the odd drink if I feel like it, but rarely. Yeah, I'll talk more about how I drink probably later, because that was it. But I will let you speak, Bart.
Thank you. I have the floor. No, that was beautiful, man, and that's a privilege as well that we had that realization together. I do think actually we already at that stage had it, because we always went out for our lunch dates,
right.
and we were really connected, and then we really connect over. Like, it wasn't a big difference.
Yeah.
I think that connection was always there, and then later I think we realized, there is a kind of crack in the pub. That's nice to add as well.
Yeah,
that isn't there in the day. Like, the connection was always there in the daytime, but then the mad crack of the pub. But you don't even need drink for that necessarily. But yeah, I think that's cool, man. I think that's a cool story. Like, I think that's why it was good for you to tell that first. I think because it's. What's interesting as well, isn't it, that it's such a coping strategy, especially here. I think everywhere, but especially here. Yeah, I'll do mine. I made some weird fucking notes. I wrote down
Can't wait.
6 Roman numerals because I was thinking while you were talking about my periods of drinking. And I was like, I can't write this out. I'll just do numbers, but then obviously they have to be Roman numerals.
Barter's later impressionistic period of alcoholism.
Exactly. We go back to the dawn of time. No, but because I was actually not obsessed with it. I remember I have a vivid memory of going to a soccer camp when I was like 12 or 13 or something, and some of the older lads having drinks and me being quite judgmental of it. I was like, oh, what's going on? So I had kind of had a judgment of it. It's like, why would you need that or something like that? Which is an interesting. I don't know where I got that from actually, because I don't think that was a thing in my house. Now my dad and my mum both didn't drink a lot, so maybe that was part of it. But so that was the start. And then when I started going out when I was like 16, I remember like I was hard. I think I drank like Baileys or something, like some fucking ridiculous sweet shit. And then that went over into pints and stuff. But it was actually. Yeah, I remember a few nights where I got a bit drunk, but it was always fine. We would always cycle quite a long way.
Sure.
It's just Dutch stereotype, but listen. And I always had to bring the girls home as well. So like it was on the way the road went. We had to go through the forest, and it was always like, oh, you bring the girls home. So I always kind of felt I had to have my wits about me a little bit. I think. So it was never that heavy. But then when I started college, the drinking was much heavier, and I started working in a pub. And there was I've talked about it before, it was an amazing place, Café de Mug in Nijmegen, and lovely group of people, but it was just social life really revolved around that. And I love that sense of being really free and connecting with people, because I think that is what it does do for a lot of people. Like I didn't feel like I think it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is here. Like even when I moved to Ireland, I noticed like, oh, the drink is everywhere.
Yeah.
Like people 100% go out hard on the weekends in Holland, and there are stories. Like if I would say, oh, it's not as big a problem over there as it is here, Dutch people would probably go, well, have you seen this or that? Like there's definitely young people, especially in the countryside, drinking hard. But here it is like everywhere. Like here I really noticed like, oh wow, people can have basically a drink at any time of the day. Like even the airport thing really surprised me. Where if Irish people go to an airport, fucking I've done it even now. Like I'm integrating well, lads.
Yeah.
But like it's like it can be 6 a.m. taking a flight to the Canaries or whatever, and people are having pints. Like that really surprised me.
Well, it's almost a ritualistic or celebratory.
Well, that is the thing. I think that so I didn't have that obsession with it when I was younger that some people have it, like, oh, I want to get the drink, or I'm shy and I need to get it wasn't as strong back then for me when I was 16, 17. I think I was also quite judgmental and also towards myself, so it was quite like strict. But I love that ritualistic. I love bonding with people like yourself, like so, because connection was so important. And then if something facilitates connection or makes it easier, then you're like, yeah, grand. So then we had those college days, and that went really hard. Then I went to fucking Galway for my master's and my Erasmus. Woohoo! I think I must have drank for just every night of the week for a year straight or something. I remember one faithful 12 pubs of Christmas where I had 16 pints of Guinness, which is not... No, well, this is the thing, like... That's not a thing to be proud of. Like that could be, I do have to point out, I weigh like 140 kilos or something. So that offsets it a little bit, but it's mad. And then, so I suppose that was stage 3 or 4 of the Roman numerals. And then
the long-awaited sequel.
And then I suppose coming back to Holland again, I was more like just having a bit of wine with Yvonne. And then when I became a dad, I really had to dial it back.
Yeah.
Now, it was already pretty dialed back when I was just working and stuff. But when I became a dad, I really had to dial it back because I had no sleep.
Yeah, sure.
And then when you've no sleep, and I literally had very little sleep. Like it was for a long time, it was like 3.5 hours a night, and you just function on pure adrenaline, and you actually think that you're kind of fine. But then when you have one good night's sleep, your body goes, oh, I'm going to cash a few checks. And you just go, oh my God. So then it really, and since then I think it's been much lighter for me. But there have been times like when I went to visit my wonderful Chinese medicine friend who's sitting across from me right now, and you were like, you're drinking a good bit at the moment. Like, in fairness, you're never judgmental, but it's more like, you're drinking a bit more, and then it'd be like, yeah, I am actually drinking a bit more. Okay, this was very rambly and not as concise, but I just wanted to give a little account of it. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that what never was there during all the college times and all the time before was stress drinking.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that since becoming a father, stress drinking has entered my life a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's always been, like, I've never done anything in recent years drunk that I wouldn't, that was an issue, or it's never interfered with my duties as a parent. But I have noticed that kind of thing of like, I'm fucking wrecked. I'm stressed out of my gills. Geez, let's have a pint. And it wouldn't, like, in a situation like that, you can't go hard. But I would notice that, whereas before I was always like, I never get that thing of where people drink because they're sad or because they're anxious. And then I was like, now I get it. Yeah. It was just like, I have zero time, and this drink will help me create a little moment for myself where I can just really quickly unwind. But then obviously there's a price to pay for that.
Well, there's a few things I want to say. And the first thing I want to say is I have seen people get very set off by this conversation. And
we should have done a few disclaimers maybe.
No, I think it's good because we're just talking about our stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the best way to talk about this is I will talk about my relationship with alcohol and my thoughts about it.
Yeah.
I don't judge anyone. Like, honestly, and I know that's easy to say, and saying you don't judge anyone is also sometimes not enough because sometimes people still feel judged, I hope you don't mind me saying you had a little bit of this when I stopped. I remember you for a little while was like, maybe am I drinking too much? You had a house party in Doolin where you got merry. You had a couple of pints and a couple of whiskeys. And afterwards, like, I was a mess. And you absolutely weren't. You were perfect. You were merry. It was your house. You were having a party. You were completely appropriately behaved. But I think for a little while, a couple of weeks, there was a little bit of like, when I stopped fully, I think there was a little bit of you that maybe judged is the wrong word, but there was like, do I need to look at this now?
That's interesting. I forgot about that. It was only a very small thought in my mind, but I definitely wasn't putting it on you, or I wasn't annoyed. It was more that I was thinking, maybe that would be healthier. But I see what you mean. Like, it's kind of how someone reflects.
And come here.
Back at you,
And every Irish person has fucking experienced this when you try to not have a drink on a night out and how pushy people get. Because I actually used to cycle on and off drink quite a bit. I'd quit drinking for 6 or 12 weeks at a time, a couple of times. I used to have to tell people I was taking antibiotics or I was driving. And even still, pints and whiskies would appear in front of you, And, when I stopped drinking altogether, people are like, you shut up and have a fucking drink. Have a pint and relax, for fuck's sake, And like, I definitely at the start, I had to be a bit boundary to the point of being a bit of an asshole. Just to be like, no. Now I'm much gentler about it because I'm not 100% teetotal, and also I'm just like gentler. I'm not as attached to it. I think you're attached to something if you're 100% or you're 0%, But when we're talking about this, I will talk about my story. I have a lot of thoughts on it. This might be relevant. It might not. And like, the last thing I want to do is somebody who's fucking working hard, taking care of their family, earning a crust, and just likes to enjoy themselves with a couple of pints on the weekends. I'm not trying to take that away from anyone, I think it comes down to kind of broadly 2 or 3 things. One is a phrase I really like, and I'm going to use the word addiction here, but I'm not saying anyone's an addict, but don't ask what's wrong with an addiction, or let's say habit. Don't ask what's wrong with a habit, ask what's right with it. What purpose is it serving? The other thing is, I think how people drink is incredibly important. I don't think it's just about units of alcohol per week. And I also think it just affects different people different ways. I think
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it didn't suit me. And it was doing something. My habit, / addiction, was serving a purpose in my life. And for me, taking it out helped me realize what it was doing for me, the good parts of the drinking or the work that the drink was doing. And I've worked hard now to try to replace the stuff that drink was giving me with other things.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm able to now enjoy it a little bit more.
It's interesting that you kind of need a positive experience. Like, I'm doing a bit of work on something, but it's too long a story. But it's kind of like you can't. Eckhart Tolle says this. The sort of spiritual teacher. Like, you don't. I found this really helpful. He's like, if you want to eat less cookies, you're gonna have to examine what the relationship is with the cookie. So if you're like really craving a cookie, have a cookie, but maybe wait 2 minutes and just look at that little gremlin inside of you to go, why do you want these cookies? Or who are you? What's going on? Like, I think that's so in a way, like your story, it's like, oh, you were actually kind of taking the drinking apart a little bit, and you weren't like, oh, I have to stop, I have to white knuckle it. Like, white knuckling it doesn't work.
I've done that. Like, I would go off drink for 6 or 12 weeks, and I would just be counting the days until I could go back on it. It accomplished nothing.
It's like, it's that thing of pushing something away gives it loads of force behind it, But I think in this way, you were like, oh, actually, I like connection. Oh, I'm still having connection. Oh, I'm going to do a little trial with this person who apparently seems safe enough. Thank you. To make it about yourself, Bart. Nice. but to trial it, to see if, and okay, it's working. And then you can, it softly dissolves. And I think that goes with a lot of things. And I think if I look at the difference between, like, and I don't want to harp on about that too much about the different countries, because it's so often it is an individual journey. But I think that you said it really well there in your story, that I think the Irish people, and especially for some reason I feel it's more Irish lads, but women definitely do it as well. The quite large amounts of drink that just on average are consumed here, that there is the need behind it is a beautiful need. It's that need for connection and inclusion and just being a bit more relaxed. And I honestly think that one of the reasons, I don't know if I'm annoyed at myself for saying this, but I'm just going to throw it out and you can cut my head off, it's fine. I think the dark history of this country has something to do with the amount of drink. I don't think it's that Irish people are any, like, sometimes people talk about, oh, it's genetically this or that. Maybe, but I think.
But your history also has an impact.
Yeah, has an impact
genetics,
on your
epigenetics.
Epigenetics, that's the word I was looking for. And so I really think that is part of it. Like,
That's a really dangerous thing to say.
Yeah.
And that's been lingering under the surface for me as well. And again, that's something I've said where I've had Irish people say, go the way of fuck out of it. Like,
and I get that, because people don't want to be labeled as something, which I completely understand. And I'm not, it's just a general thought that I have. It's not, I'm not talking about individuals.
And I don't think we think it's like a magic bullet. It's like the famine, therefore drink.
No.
It's not that it was a famine, but anyway, on Gorthamore. But I think there's something to that, Bart, and I would say it, and I think it takes a fair amount of bravery as a Dutch person, like a non-national, to say it, but I've said it as a national as well and gotten some pretty strong feedback. I don't think it's just that, but I think we historically, Irish people have historically not really had a future as individuals.
Oh, that's a good way.
Like we it doesn't matter how hard we worked the best you could. For the vast majority of Irish people, for a long time since we've been colonized, at least, it didn't matter. You had to work incredibly hard just to stay alive, and even then, half your family would probably die. Yeah. So, like, what are you investing in? Why wouldn't you have a feed of pints and live in the moment and connect with the people around you and find a bit of joy? And I think that's a big influence on our music and our poetry and our art and so on, because the pub, as it was in generations past, as being a community hub, was so vitally important to so many aspects of Irish life and culture. And, I talked to my father. He says when he was, 20, 25 and he was around in the pub, he might get like 2 stouts, 1 beer, 1 whiskey, 2 orange juices and a cup of tea. He said it was not necessarily there. You were not there to booze. You were there to drink and chat, and some people would, he said it was a lot more varied in terms of what people drank. But now obviously, and it's not easy to be a publican, by the way. Like, it's hard to turn a profit, but obviously, it makes sense. Like, you'll earn more if people are drinking more, And I'll put a pin in it there for a moment because there's something else I want to move on to off that. But is there anything you want to say there?
Yeah, what I actually want to say is that's kind of beside this point, and we've talked about this before. But I know what I said there. Like, that can be tricky saying that as a non-national, but also I'm done with that shit.
Yeah.
And I know you are too. I'm not putting it on you, but I'm like, you can have your opinion from your experience. And I don't give a fuck about your identity labels. Like, that really is something I'm feeling strongly in myself. You didn't annoy me there or anything, but it's something I was thinking about. I was like, I've lived in these 2 countries. I think I can make a comparison. And if that is annoying, go fuck yourself. No, I don't mean that either. But it's because I want to connect with people. But it's like, I'm just gonna stand.
No, I hear it. I have the
stand
same.
by what I feel. But and there's the caveat. 100%, I am making a generalization. I heard someone saying this the other day, which I thought was pretty good. It was I think it was some kind of sociologist who was doing a lot of gender research, and he was like, when you say men are stronger than women, we all know that you're not saying, every man is stronger than every woman. Yeah. It's like, no, you're saying on average. And that's the same with this.
Exactly.
Like, we all understand the complexities of life. And in a way, I kind of take my hat off to the people of this country as well, because they have forged in the fires of absolute shite, of colonization and the horror of the famines, or they probably shouldn't be called that. Like, maybe they should be called genocide or something else, but sure, those words are all loaded as well. But like, all that horror for such a long time, I am amazed that people are so resilient to create all that beauty out of it. Because I do think the Irish pub is actually like a beacon of light. Like, I don't know,
no,
to bring it back down to earth.
It can be, but yes.
It can be, exactly. Yeah. And like, there's this thing on Headspace's meditation app, to make it a bit lighter again.
They have a pub?
They have but they have these kind of people with beautiful voices telling stories to help you go to sleep.
Okay.
And it's usually like, it's a cabin on a rainy night or something. And it's kind of like, I feel that way about the Irish pub. It's like, that's the warmest place I can imagine. The one in my head is probably Chi Nocton's in Galway, where in the winter where they have the fire on. It's one of those pubs which is like an old shop,
It's a great
they
pub.
have all the nooks, and it's just lovely, and people are connecting by the fire. And so in a way, I understand. But it was funny that there was kind of a fire in me, where I was like, I'm done with being apologetic about any kind of identity markers, because I love people, and I think we all should listen to people regardless of where they're from. Anyway, I'll stop being annoying now.
I think that's very fair, Bart, and I think it facilitates conversation and dialogue, so I am in favour of it. And I know you mean it with respect, and you're not making a huge generalisation, but I think it's not mad to say there's something to that. Now, I am going to say something mad, right? And this is just going to catapult this conversation into the pretentious stratosphere. And I can feel eyes rolling as I say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it's just an idea I'm knocking around. This is not a statement, but this is something I'm thinking of. I'm beginning to think that any substance that alters your mental state should be primarily imbibed in a communal and ritualistic setting.
I see what you're...
At least initially. And I think you can apply this to pretty much anything. And I think that's why I say it's very important how you drink. If you look at how Irish people used to drink, you come in out of the wet into a pub, all your friends are there, your family are there, your community's there, you're drinking a few pints, you're huddled around the fire, you're breathing each other's air, you're, kind of hugging each other and chatting and exchanging, and you're drinking. I think that's very healthy. I'm going to say it. I know alcohol is not good for you in any kind of big quantities in terms of like its chemical effects on the body and the liver and all that. But I think overall that is really important. And I think you can expand this to a lot of things, like the Rastafaris, and I'm pretty sure they actually don't like being called that. So I apologize. I remember reading once that that's not their preferred term. So if anyone knows what, please do correct me. But even smoking marijuana was meant to be done in order to connect with God and study the scriptures. It was meant to be in a group. Historically, it was not recommended for people to do it on their own. You look at the things with ayahuasca now, where it's meant to be,
what I was thinking,
done in a group. You're meant to prepare for it. You're meant to do it in a group that can support you. You're meant to leave your day-to-day mental state, go somewhere else, and bring the learning back with the support of a community and with the support of a ritual practice. Like, it's very different from doing ketamine at a festival, So I think some problems with these things then start to happen when you remove it from its communal setting and its ritualistic setting. And I am talking about the pub and Irish trad and stuff as being a slightly ritualistic setting as well, because you go there, you do the same thing that your lineage has been doing. But then you buy a bottle of wine, you drink it at home. You down a naggin on the way to the nightclub. It's different. You're then imbibing for the sake of the effect on your mind and body, rather than for the overall experience where the alcohol is just a part of that.
Yeah, 100%. Because I used to never drink at home before. I would always drink in a pub and stuff, and that would always it's kind of held in a way. Like, it can go wrong as well, of course. But then, like, a bit later on, like drinking whiskey at home, which actually can be a nice experience as well. Like, you can have a nice kind of thoughtful experience, but there is that it then becomes more about the numbing quality or something. And I really see it with the non-alcoholic beers. Like, I quite like the taste of the Guinness Zero. It's not the exact same, but they did a fair enough job. And I noticed that in certain settings in the pub, I really couldn't care less if that's what you gave me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like for instance, when we're playing music, I'm so just used to having a sip after a song or a tune. Well, I'm driving. That's better if that's not alcoholic one, But then at home, you probably wouldn't do that so quickly, maybe.
Yeah, and I don't think it's zero. Like I said, I think it should primarily be ritual communal settings. But I think once you have good experience there, you know how to handle your alcohol and stuff, have a fucking whiskey or two while you're sat at home looking at the fire. I don't think that's going to do you any harm, as long as you have the experience and the maturity, and as long as you're doing your homework. I was talking to somebody who used to facilitate ayahuasca retreats, and they stopped doing it. And I asked them why, and their answer was people weren't doing their fucking homework, and they weren't cleaning up after themselves psychically. They weren't preparing before they came in, and they weren't doing the work afterwards. They were just coming in, having this huge emotional purge, leaving and coming back next month. So I think if you are aware of, like, if you're doing your homework, if your life is broadly in order, we all go through times where, and I'm not saying I'm above this, we all have like a stressful week, you're like, I'm having a fucking drink. Yeah. But like, if you're not leaning on that too heavily, then I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, and I like what you said as well, that if you have a zero kind of tolerance policy, that is in itself also, kind of the same thing as drinking a lot. In a weird way, like it's different, but it creates it might create tension as well. Like, and then there are people who honestly don't give a monkeys, and that's different because then you're outside of that polarity, I think. But you've really been since that time. You've really been quite light on it, hey? I don't think I've seen you drink more than 2 drinks. Yeah.
Yeah.
since then.
No, I will be completely honest. I love it. I actually, and like this is not a line,
Yeah.
I've gotten to the stage where I love it. And I actually loved being on zero alcohol by the end as well. I had to go to zero because what I found was that I wanted to know why I was drinking, but I didn't know why I was drinking because I was drinking.
Yeah.
The gift of sobriety is painful clarity.
Yeah.
These little bits where you're like, I just don't want to look at that right now.
Yeah.
So I'll have a quick drink.
Yeah.
Become inescapable.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I feel like shit. Why do I feel like shit? Because of that thing over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, fuck it. I need to deal with it. So, and not all these are big things. I will tell you what I learned from going to zero alcohol, and not all of it is deep darkness. So one thing I learned, I'm super sensitive to loud noises. Super sensitive. I love music. I quite like pubs. I would go see a band. And what I realized when I went completely sober was that, oh my God, I walk into a heaving pub and a band is there with amplification or a drummer or even just like a load of trad musicians or whatever. Like I go into fight or flight mode. I'm like, Jesus, oh God. Yeah. And I should be happy. These are all my friends. Why am I so wound up? And I used to drink 2 pints really quickly. And then I was like, oh, this is fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Now I have earplugs. Yeah. I have a really good set of like, I'm not sponsored by them, but what are they called? Downbeats. I find them really good. They cut all frequencies equally, so you can still hear conversation. If you just get the rubber, the foam earplugs, they cut treble 3 times as much as they cut bass. So that's you end up. So the Downbeats, I find them really good. They're on my keys, so I just put them on when I go into a place, and then I'm like, oh, I don't need the booze anymore, and I can actually chat to people and enjoy it. Another thing I found, I was coming home, and if I was late. It was a bit late and I was hungry and I was tired. I'd have a beer while I was cooking. I'd have a beer when I was tired. And I'm like, now I just don't have a beer and I just rest. I'm like,
yeah.
But like, that's one of the things I was using booze for. Another thing was there was a couple of people I was hanging out with that I could enjoy with 2 or 3 pints inside of me that I can't enjoy sober. And unfortunately, those people... That's another thing that happens, you know, like you can't, you become a little bit more honest.
Yeah, I just remember a comedian doing a joke about like someone you would only sleep with if you had a few drinks, you know, you call them an 8-pinter, you know, it's like, that's a lot actually. That's not someone who's super appealing to you.
Yeah.
But, I know 100% like, yeah, I think that's it. It's making me think about our podcast with Joe Flynn a lot as well. It talks about like, yeah, it's that relational aspect to things. Like if you're using things to numb or to avoid, I actually think while you were talking, I was thinking, I think that is one of the reasons I still do like drink. And what I tend to do now is not drink during the week and then have some drinks on Friday. Now the Sunday session is messing with this a bit because I was more like, oh, I'll have some, have a good few drinks on Friday, good few, like nothing mental, but just like half a bottle of wine and a pint or something, you know, which, well, you can find that a lot. I don't know. It's okay for me. But while me and Yvonne have a date night and it's nice, you know, and then maybe 2 beers on a Saturday and then that's it. But now on the Sunday when we're playing, I do sometimes have 1 or 2 drinks as well. But what I think the reason I still like it is because I can be really hard on myself about doing the work.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, I've even had a couple of therapists say to me, you don't always have to be doing therapy.
Yeah.
You don't always have to be improving. Like, not that I'm saying, oh, I'm so cool, I'm improving, but more like there is a part of me that's kind of cracking the whip.
Yeah.
And I think
the tyranny of the work, I think we
exactly. And I think I'm trying to ease off that, and I am actually doing it as well. But then that can become work as well.
Yeah.
But then the drink just helps me kind of go, okay, not tonight.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's absolute. Yeah. I have no problem with that, and that's the reason now I have the odd drink. And I would just say now, if I'm going to drink, I have a few rules for when I drink, and it is I check in with myself. Is everything in order? Like, am I drinking to fix a problem? Or am I drinking because I'm in a good mood and my mates are around and there's a bit of music?
It's a joyous thing.
And I feel like a drink.
Yeah.
And if I do that, I'll have a drink. If I feel good and I feel like a drink, I'll have one. But if I feel bad and I'm using the drink to fix a problem,
Yeah.
I do not. I'm like, I will not do that. And that's me. I'm not saying everyone should be like that, but I'm saying for me, that's it. And I have a few other things as well. And again, the pain and discomfort of going sober pushed me to change my lifestyle and develop new practices. This did not happen quickly. There was about fucking 3 to 6 months where it was intensely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Where because I removed the filter of alcohol, I was like, oh shit, there's this and this and this and this and this. And it really was a period of, this was doing the work, actually. It was. But it paid off. It paid off.
But it is that what you're describing, that like I'm at the moment doing the course on masculinity with Niall Graham, who we hopefully will have on later this year.
Absolutely.
And
Can't wait.
and it's super powerful, but it really makes me see, if I'm going to change certain things I want to change, I'm going to have new behaviors. But when you're doing that, like you were doing that with the alcohol, your ego is kind of like, fuck, so can I never, are we really gonna, like, the ego really seems to, I don't know, maybe you can put this better than I can, but like it seems to attach to certainty or something, or safety in what it knows. Like it's like, are we never gonna be doing this again? Oh fuck, I can't. Or maybe
that's how we have fun. You're gonna take that
exactly.
Away from me.
And just you kind of start tricking yourself. Whereas actually, if you can stay in that space, I think that's the biggest thing. We're definitely not giving advice here, but I'd say instead of going hard on yourself and being punishing, that's never. Well, actually, that is an advice I will give out.
Yeah.
Punishing yourself is never going to solve anything.
No, it's not.
And like, but finding a different practice is. But that takes
that booze is doing something. The drink is doing something for you. Like I figured out what mostly. I think I'm not going to say I'm done with the journey, but I'm like I figured out a lot of what it was doing for me.
Yeah.
And it's been a phenomenal teacher. Yeah. Like, how else would I have figured this out? Like that's the thing. Like.
100%.
Sometimes it's there to teach you, right? And like you hear all these stories about people hitting rock bottom and rebuilding their lives and stuff. You don't need to do that. It's there in front of you. Yeah. If you pay attention to how you feel, when, where, and why you are reaching for drinks, every time you take a drink, and this is not everyone, by the way, I want to talk about that as well, but for a lot of people, every time your hand closes around a drink, it's teaching you something. It's like a warning light going off in your dashboard, saying, hey, there's something to look at here. Now, I will say, there's people who I think have very healthy drinking habits, who actually drink much more than I ever drank, but do it in social settings. They don't get hangovers. They're fit. They, fulfill their duties as a wife, a husband, a father, all these things. And they're just a beacon of positivity and a night out. And they're just like... I don't see those people as having, I wouldn't be going to them going, you need to look at your drinking. I don't think everyone needs that.
No, 100%. I was thinking so many things at once that now
I could see your face. That's why I stopped talking.
Yeah, but I had too many. Well, I was thinking, that's actually in one of the Roman numerals, which is a thing now, apparently. What I was thinking was like, when I moved to Galway, I fell instantly in love with Galway, with this country, with its people. But I was drinking a lot, especially during my Erasmus, 6 months first living here, or in Galway, but here in Ireland. And I think it really helped me to make it easier to connect with people, because I found it very strange to be like a student in Nijmegen in the Netherlands, having loads of people around me, loads of friends, loads of acquaintances, and then dropping yourself into a completely new space where you don't know anyone, where you're like, this is a fucking cool place, but Jesus, will they want me? What will I do here? Will I be able to connect? And it definitely took the edge off.
Oh, for
being
sure.
able to connect with people in those beautiful pub environments over a few drinks. But
again, that's ritualistic and communal.
It is ritualistic and communal, but it definitely went too far as well.
Yes,
it was
of course.
definitely too much drink. Yeah. And I still was well behaved and stuff, but it can't have been good for my body. But the payoff was I got a lovely connection and I felt much more comfortable. And now I'm I'm not saying it's like that. I couldn't be here without the drink or anything. But now that's much easier. But that was a journey as well. Like you have to get to know a place and its customs and kind of, it's very scary. Like I found that very like that feeling of real like homesickness. I wasn't even like longing for my other home, but it was more like when you're in a place like this is a cool place, but I don't know anyone here.
Yes.
And the Wi-Fi wasn't connected either. And you're just there going, wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's a scary place for us herd animals to be like. And then that definitely helped, and I had lots of lovely experiences and made lots of like friends and nice acquaintances and whatever in a really short time. And that was kind of what the drink did offer. And like that's not a payoff I feel sorry about.
No.
I mean, if I had fucking done something horrible or, smacked my head or had to go to the hospital, that would have been different. But, it's definitely, you're doing it for a reason. It made me think of like Yvonne in therapy sometimes talks about ziektevinst, which means like the benefits of illness, which is like if someone has, someone is sick, but maybe they don't want to get better because it's actually serving. Like it's a bit what Breed was talking about last week, where it's like sometimes people don't want to.
Yeah, because when they're sick, their family come to visit. Or
exactly.
Yeah.
I think Tommy Tiernan, lovely comedian from Galway. He tells a story of where he stopped drinking for like 10 years or something, just because he was excited about seeing what that was like. I really think there is something to that. There is something about that exploratory mindset. And then he tells a story very funny of being on holiday with his wife, who's also called Yvonne, and her just going, Jesus, will you have a fucking drink? In a way, that's the bad kind of pushiness that you were doing, but it's kind of funny, like, because I think he literally didn't drink for 5 years or something, and you're just like, oh, come on, you're no crack, will you have a drink? And then now he's on the drink, and he actually, in his podcast, which I think has ended now, the Tommy Hector and the Larita podcast, he was talking about, like, downing a good bit of whiskey every week. He's like, oh, I just have a beautiful glass of whiskey. And that's me for the night. But I think there is really something about that exploratory spirit that's very good.
Yeah, for sure. I've got to say, like, yeah. I'll come back to it. But God, yeah, I'm finding this quite deep, I'll be honest. Like, I kind of feel like talking about the drink is a little bit like being sucked down a drain or something like that. Like,
yeah. I'm finding that there is so much. I usually don't take a lot of notes, but I actually think that it actually ties into a lot.
It does.
And I'm finding that because I feel there's so much to say about it, I'm really kind of talking in a kind of scattershot way, which probably is a bit annoying to listen to. Sorry, guys. But it's very interesting, and it's such a big cultural thing here in the West. I think, and it has its beautiful bits and its horrible bits.
I think one thing that I was pleasantly surprised at when I cut back is that there is a lot of people in Ireland drink a certain way into a certain amount, but not everyone. And when you cut back, you realise that there is another tribe there in Ireland that are quite a bit quieter. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that are doing stuff that don't involve booze. Like, and they're just, I don't know, they don't seem to be highlighted as much or something, but Alcoholics Anonymous is huge in Ireland. You'd be very surprised. And I think we should probably say that, like, not that I'm qualified to give anyone advice, but if this is like making anyone think that they might need a bit of help or something, I don't think everyone who drinks needs to go to AA, but if you are ever thinking about it, I will say I know a lot of people, not personally, but I know a lot of people who have gotten an awful lot from that organization. So
you know what I think is good about that? I've not been in AA, and hopefully won't need to necessarily, but actually it sounds quite beautiful to me, because I think what they figured out is that it is actually connection. and purpose. And that it's actually, I think the story, what was the guy called who started it again?
Can't remember.
Joseph something, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I think the story is that he was drinking a lot, and then he was on the phone to someone for 3 hours, and he hadn't thought about drink because he was really connected.
Yeah.
So it actually ties into your story, you know.
Yeah.
Because I think, we have such a crime and punishment kind of mentality, and it's actually, it's like, I loved when you sit there at the start, like, oh, people want connection or something. You're like, it's like, we're not drinking to be dicks, you know. We're drinking because we're all kind of. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I'm kind of thinking we're all children of God. I don't know why I would say it like that, but it because I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, I suppose. I suppose he said, definitely.
Adjusting his halo.
How fucking woo are you? Where's the Chinese? But isn't it? It's much nicer to go and look at it like that.
Yeah,
like we all want basically the same things, and I think sometimes what happens is we fall into that dichotomy with so many things where it's like drink bad, drink good. Even like when they were trying to do more progressive policies around like heroin use and stuff, and it was like, oh, it's an illness, and I'm like, I like that you're bringing more compassion to this, but I think you're making it into a binary again. You know, where before it's like you're bad if you're a drug user, and then it's like, no, you're sick if you're a drug user, and it's like you're a fucking human being with needs. Let's look at what you actually need instead of the kind of ways you found to try and get something. Let's see if there's a better way to get those things. We keep falling into those binaries, man.
I think so, and this is the thing I was really worried about with this episode, is just that it would sound judgmental. And I really hope it doesn't. I'm talking about my story. I'm much happier now, and I've learned a lot that I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't come off it. But at the same time, the act of coming off it taught me. So the alcohol played a really important role for me. And just to finish my last thought before I move on to something, but there are communities here. Like, since I've cut way back, you're like, oh, you do find other stuff to do. Anyone who's thinking about this, just be aware you might drift from your friends, like, that are still big in the pints. You might lose friends, right? Like, that's... I'm not going to say everything's going to be okay. That was the scariest part for me. And definitely I felt a distance with some people who I was very close to and very much did not want to lose. But I got to the stage where I was like, I have to do this. And so, and I would say big picture, it has all worked out okay. But little picture, step by step, it was very difficult at times. So you will likely lose people. You need to be okay with that. You will also gain people. Like, if you make a bold choice like this, like to stop drinking in a society where a lot of people drink, you lose one of your tribes. But it's also like sending up a flare where you can find your new tribe. And there's a lot of people out there who either, they might, excuse me, they might still be drinkers, but they don't want the boozy pub culture, you know, or they might be complete teetotalers, or they might be, for example, the Sunday session we play in runs from 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. so that we can get like parents there, a lot of trad sessions start at 9 or 10. Excuse me. So ours, and that serves a certain demographic, because neither me nor you really enjoy sinking pints and playing music until 4 o'clock in the morning. No judgment on anyone. That's another
We've
really
such
important.
a late gig tonight, buddy.
Let's not talk about it. But and let's not talk about who we're playing for. Anyway, but just you will find people, and you will find practices, and you will find communities, and you will find spaces but you that takes a while because you have to go through the discomfort.
And you mightn't even lose all those people. I think that's a really good point that you're making there. And what it makes me kind of think of is it's a bit similar like when you're like really a people pleaser, which I definitely have been in the past, you know. Like you're really people pleasing because you're like, if I don't, I'm going to lose all this, or I'm going to be lonely or whatever. But then if you go, it's not genuine. It's not, there are more genuine versions of me than being a people pleaser.
Yeah.
So I'm going to trust in being more genuine, and what will happen is the people who just like me because I was always pleasing them, they might fall away, but then I think nicer people will show up. They will actually see you for more of what you are, and it might actually give some people who you're already friends with the space to go, oh, I'd like some of that. And
yes.
I think being more genuine, it is always better, but it's risky. And that's why we don't always do it.
And that might happen. You might find friends around that go, oh shit, I actually really like what you're doing. Let's walk this together. Yeah. But you can't count on that.
Exactly. And this is the thing, you have to let go. I think this is with a lot of meaningful things, you have to let go of the outcome, but know that it is a good thing to do in itself.
And you might have a friend that's like, maybe you're like, oh, I want to drink less, but you might have a friend that actually has like a very obvious problem.
Yeah.
And if you cut back, you might find that friend digging in their heels and go, well, fuck you, I'm going to drink twice as well. And like all you want in the world might be, don't please come over. Sometimes they're not ready. Like, and you cannot take responsibility. You cannot be superior when you're doing this.
No. That's the other thing. But it's also like we're always reflecting back at each other.
Yeah.
It's like, I heard someone say this about beauty. Like, if you are like a super beautiful person, just physically, so let's say, like yourself, Anthony.
Yes, I knew who you were talking about.
But like, it's a thing that actually reflects back at people who feel that maybe they're not beautiful. And people can get really annoyed with beautiful people. Yeah. And it's the same thing with growth over being...
Sorry,
you thought I was talking about myself, weren't you? People are so annoyed with me.
I had an experience where I met a fella and at an event, and I kind of half know him, and he's a really lovely guy. Yeah. And... but kind of just average looking, right?
Yeah.
And
which
then
is a great way to be.
Yeah, and then he just like he introduced his girlfriend, and she is like model beauty and the nicest person in the world. But like there's attractive people, and there's like people that have that look
perfect.
CGI, you know, and you just feel like such a fucking troll next to them. I was like,
but it can be nice in a way as well. Like I've always said, really happened to be kind of a 7 out of 10 because. It's like, if I put on the charm, it's good enough that people will find you attractive, but also if you don't want attention, you won't get that much. Now, being tall is actually more of a problem for me because you kind of can't hide. But it's like, I know people, I won't name you now, guys, but you know who you are, like who've always gotten so much attention. And it's not nice always. Like you're always getting looked at all the time. But anyway, I'm kind of floating away from where I was going.
The reflection.
Like it's the reflection part. It's like anything you will do, any growth you will have or change you will make will fucking annoy people. Even if it's like, I'm going to look after myself better, it's like, who the fuck do you think you are? Because it's making me look at myself and I'm uncomfortable with that. Yeah. So I think that'll always happen. Like, and yeah.
And the funny thing is, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about in the temporarily abandoned conflict episode, because I had this experience where I was like, well, you know, sometimes you need to change yourself and that'll rub up badly around the people around you. And I was like, and create conflict. And I was like, I think some of the most important choices you make are the ones that make everyone around you catch fire. Yeah. Because like, if you're okay with annoying 5 or 10 or 50 people, you must really want to make this change. You must really want to make this choice. And if you're scared of that conflict, you're not going to make that really important change.
Yes.
And if you're asking all those people for permission before that you can like, oh my God, I just don't want it. Sometimes you just have to go for it.
100%. And like we communicate quite closely together. And I'm sure there's going to be times, even subconsciously, where we're rubbing off on each other the wrong way. But it's just believing in that there's enough space in the relationship to do that, and also accepting that if there isn't, that's just the way it's gonna have to be, because we have to all aim for being genuine. I had a really nice coffee date with two girlfriends of mine who probably don't want to be named, but you know who you are if you're listening. I know one of you will be listening. And we were talking about I had done like a gig the night before where I was like, isn't it, it's a bit of a tangent, but I think it relates. Like, I always imagined, like, oh, isn't it beautiful if you can sing in a pub and play in a pub and everyone's singing along, and it's a really communal, connective experience. And I had that, and everyone was like really enthusiastic and whatever. And I was talking to them about, isn't it interesting though, that validation that I always craved, when you get it, it's a lovely feeling, but that ebbs away quite quickly. The connection of it will always remain valuable to me. But the validation you get where people say, hey, you're a cool guy or something, that's something that you really long for when you're younger, but it ebbs away really quickly. But with these two friends, I said, with them, like with you, I have shared parts of me that are really vulnerable and that I'm a bit ashamed of or really sad about and that feel really small. Like those people in the pub, they were getting the glamorous version. Even like, obviously I do want to be genuine in that as well. Like I will be singing from my heart, and it will be, it's not that it's not real.
I don't know. I like the Jungian idea of the persona where the ego meets the society, and it's completely a part of you. Like we all have a persona because there's two things coming together. It's the inner world and the outer world. Where they meet is the persona. It's a bit of a mix of how people see you and how you see yourself and how you present it. It's not a bad thing.
Exactly. And it is genuine in that way, but it is performative.
Yes.
And I said to them, like, so that adulation, is that the right word? Doesn't matter. Ebbs away quite quickly. Like that night I'll be kind of like, oh, that was nice. But I think the glow is actually more from doing what I love and connecting with those people in the audience and with the other players. But then I said, I was talking with those girlfriends, and I was saying, like, you guys have seen me at probably my worst or my most painful recently or most lowest, and you went like, yeah, we still love you. We still like this guy. That does so much more. Like having the nice version of you get like applause, it really doesn't do a lot. Being brave enough to show the really shameful, small, hurt version of you, and people going, yeah, you're fine. But, I think that's a huge thing.
That's such a boozy thing as well. Like when you get so drunk, you're propping each other up. You're trying to get a kebab and a taxi home, and it turns into a 3-hour long like saga. And you wake up the next morning, you're both dying, or not both, you're all dying. But you're dying together. And you're like, it's so bonding. And it's bonding because it's fucking traumatic. You know? Like, you know, you're
inflicting.
You're putting the body through stuff, and you're spending too much money, and you're eating shit food, and I wonder, you know, for that certain type of I'm going to call it nihilistic drinking. It's like where you want to drink to get to that stage. You don't just want like a few drinks and a buzz and a chat. You want to like have that. I wonder, is it? And I could be wrong, but like, you know, our society's pretty safe now. We don't often have situations that are kind of life or death kind of thing. You know, we have sports and booze and stuff like that now where you can play at it. And it comes back to connection because, I remember like hungover days in college, like binging comedies, watching Black Books under a blanket with good mates, you know, and just dying and just having such warm, wonderful memories of that time. And you're right, like connection. Yeah. And
The Hangover, like I can love The Hangover. Like I'm not talking about the films, which can be funny as well. But like I've had, especially I'm thinking of my Galway days where I was just dying, but you wake up laughing nearly where you're like, oh, that was some crack. Jesus, I need to get to the Subway to get my bacon and chicken fucking foot long and the American like soft kind of chocolate chip cookies and a Diet Coke. Just a little tip for all of you there. And also I had like a student card to get a discount forever. So it was brilliant. We wouldn't pay a fucking thing for it. And sure, you wouldn't win, not in today's money, you wouldn't be able to. but being feeling quite tender.
Yeah.
And then I would listen to music and it would fill me up, or you
Yeah,
would go
yeah,
for
yeah.
a quiet coffee or a recovery pint. There's the fucking vicious cycle there.
Yeah.
Like the nicest Paddy's Day I've ever had was the nicest boozy Paddy's Day. I've had a really nice like family Paddy's Days, which were more important to me. But like I had the nicest Paddy's Day was with a Dutch friend of mine who it was hilarious as well. Like I'll tell the story. I think it's a funny story. I was just dating Yvonne, and I was back in the Netherlands, and I wanted to stay a few days longer, but the only affordable flight that I could find went through Belfast. And my pal was flying into Dublin. He was going to visit me in Galway. We're going to do Paddy's Day together. And I was like, oh no, I can make that work, because what I'll do is I'll arrive on the same day as him into Belfast as he's arriving in Dublin, and we'll both travel up together. And sure, Belfast is not that far from Dublin, but I had no clue how to get from fucking Belfast to Dublin. I hadn't looked at it. So I was like, I'm a Dutch man. We take the train. I'll take the train.
Oh,
Shouldn't
God,
have taken
Bart.
the fucking train. Should not have taken the fucking train. So I was like, he landed into, I think I even made him, like, I was such a dick as well. I think he even already had to stay a night in Dublin, and then we would drive to Galway the next day together. So I already put him to trouble,
Yeah.
But he was easygoing, nice guy, no bother. Then, but yeah, so I took the train. I should have just taken the fucking bus, I think, and it stopped everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then I had had my first smartphone, but I didn't have internet coverage in Northern Ireland. So I had to fucking get some kind of extra SIM thing or whatever, and then I had internet because I needed internet because his fucking phone got stolen the evening he was in Dublin. So he had to go into internet cafes, which were still a thing back then, and he had to check in to see where the fuck is Bart, And I was like, "Oh, so sorry, dude. I fucked up. This is taking longer." And he just went, "Okay, I'm going to this pub. I'll see you there at 2 or something." And that was it. And I was just like, "Oh God, I'm not going to make 2. I'm not going to make 3. I'm not going to make 4. I'm not going to make 5. I'm not going to make..." And I just sent him like 14 emails in the hope that he went to the internet cafe. And the last one was just like, "You haven't read any of this. Hopefully you're still in that pub." So I went there 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. And he was there, and he was just like, such a good mate. He was just like, "Bart, brilliant to see you." I was like, I would have been livid. And he's like, "It was a bit long, but I got a book, and I only had 2 pints, and but I couldn't go to the toilet because I was so afraid that you would come in the door and I'd be gone, and you'd be like, fuck, he's gone elsewhere." But anyway, then we went to Galway. We had a lovely Paddy's Day, but actually the nicest thing was the day after, when we were fairly hungover, went for a walk in Salt Hill, went for a sneaky few whiskies, and we had the chats, and you're a bit more tender, and in a way, that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Maybe it is that tenderness. It's all that connection stuff. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, definitely
I was such a fucking dick, man. Oh, I already made him stay an extra night in Dublin, which made him lose his phone. Now, that's his fault, in fairness. And then made him wait for 6 hours. Yeah. And he didn't say a fucking word about
And the
it.
pints made it all okay.
Oh, he only had 2, so I don't know. Lightweight.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is something about, if you want to change something, about being in that discomfort. Even that little moment where I just had a little hissy fit about, fuck you guys, I'm just going to say how I feel. Part of me is like, oh, Bart, that's so ill phrased. It would be nice if you could actually do that. But then it's like, I want the change in my life that I want is to be more honest with people, and also allowing for the fact that can upset people. Not always having to go, "Well, I'm sorry, and I don't mean it like that, but please hear me out." And just like, there's the bigger part of me now that's like, and that's why I'm kind of said like, fuck ye. It's not like fuck ye. It's more like, fuck the version of myself that feels that it always needs to justify.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. If you want to change something, it's going to be a bit uncomfortable. That's the process of it.
the last thing, and I think
It will be the last thing because I've drank all the coffee and I really need to pee. Do you want a bit? This is a worse addiction for me than drink, by the way.
Yeah, well, coffee is like, I was talking about things that alter mental states. I was like, let's just skirt around coffee.
Yeah, I will say, by the way, it's funny. On this podcast, you've said a few times, I don't want to be judgmental. You can be a bit judgmental. You're not judgmental about drink or stuff like that at all. I will say, like when you were doing that thing where you were kind of coming off it, I never like it. It did that reflection thing for me, but it never. It was you were never like, and even as a practitioner, when you went, "Hey Bart, are you having a few more pints than usual?" I was like, yeah, I am, yeah. And it's also, I think, because with the Chinese medicine, you've also highlighted the benefits it has. Yeah. You know, like not like benefits as in like fucking go binge drinking, but like, it what is it, liver tea?
Yeah. So it's very funny that on the herbal granules I prescribe, I have new packaging now, but the old packaging was like standardized packaging, and there was instructions on the back, and it was like, do not consume alcohol while on these herbs. And I'm like, a bunch of our herbs are prepared in alcohol, you know. Like
yes.
They're called jiuxi, which means wine washed, but it basically means like if you have something like dangui, which is a very common herb for. None of the herbs should be used on their own, by the way. They should always be prescribed by a practitioner and in a herbal formula. The basic unit of Chinese herbal medicine is the formula, not the herb. But every once in a while, Western herbalists grab one herb and they use it for something. So dangui, or dong quai, as it's often transliterated, is often used for menstrual issues and for anemia and things like that. But if it's jiuxi dangui, which is wine-prepared dangui, it is really good for pain. So, like, what happens is you have, it's like hydrophilic and lipophilic compounds. You basically extract different compounds from the herb if you prepare in alcohol, and tend to be more moving. We would say they move more qi, which has the effect of usually relieving pain a bit better. So, liver qi stagnation is a very common thing. Basically, the liver is the organ which moves qi around the body, and it just wants to move. If qi is blocked for any reason, you get symptoms. So, and those symptoms tend to be irritability. And if you can imagine a pressure cooker that can't release, that's exactly what it is. It's this uprushing tense. You feel tension in the jaw, the neck, the shoulders. You know, people say, I carry my tension in my neck and shoulders. That's pure liver qi stagnation. And things that can stagnate liver qi, it can be you want to move and you can't move. So this can be physically. You want to move and you can't move. You're like, I just need to get out for a run, or I'm stuck behind this desk, or
that's
it can
the one
be
for me.
It can be emotionally. You want to express. It can be creatively. It can be socially. It is anything where you want to move and you're being restricted. Now, the thing is, being an adult means restricting yourself, right? We can't. You have to sit down and do your translation. You can't go run in the woods. You know, we can't say all the things we want to say to all these people. So being a grown-up in a certain way means, to an extent, repressing liver qi. Yeah. Alcohol moves liver qi.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that simple. It's like you take a drink and all of a sudden the stagnation disappears, but the thing that caused the stagnation doesn't. Like, you know, so is it okay to do? Of course it's okay to do. It's symptomatic treatment is really important. You don't always have to be working on the deep, dark roots of every issue.
You just can't.
You can't. No, you get nothing done. But it's also worth noting that this is a superficial treatment.
It kind of puts me in mind of that, like there were those hooligan films, I think in the noughties, where it was like all these British like lads in office jobs who were just fucking repressing themselves and then go out drinking and fighting on the weekend, you know?
Yeah. That's it. I mean, yeah.
And then also, like, because I do get that feeling with desk work sometimes when it's too much. I'm like, I want to get away, and then maybe a drink. But I think also then finding a way in the long term to make sure that you can express yourself.
That's it.
And we both have that jaw thing as well, which is definitely holding your tongue. So that's why I say stupid things on this podcast, so I have less of that.
Yeah.
But and I do feel it moving then. Yeah. But what was I think there was the last thing you were going
to. Last thing I want to say is just, you know, I think we'll end it on a positive note. I was going to say, like, why do we why do we need the booze to connect? But honestly, I think let's just acknowledge that I think the funny thing that I was not expecting was that I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of the drinking is about connection.
Yeah.
Like, I think the people that drink to forget or that drink to, like, those people know it. But I think a lot of us that don't know why we're drinking, we're drinking for connection. Like, I think that's not everyone, but I think that's a huge thing. And I think that's
100%.
so interesting. And it's the first point I made, but like I only really applied it to myself, but I do think it is more broadly applicable.
Oh, 100%. When I was working in that bar in Holland or in Nijmegen, like so many, I have a few guys in my head now, like older gentlemen who would come in, the hands kind of shaking, like they would grab the newspaper and sit on the edge of the bar and the hands were kind of shaking until they got their first stout, But they were like living alone. Their life could be lonely, but it wasn't lonely because they had all those people in the bar. And there is a part of me that really wants to honor that because it makes me think of that Terry Pratchett thing that he says of like, it's not the way it should be, but it's what is it? It's in the Tiffany Aching stories where they're going around the houses and they're helping like older people cut their toenails who can't do it for themselves and Tiffany, who's the main heroine of the story, she kind of goes like, it shouldn't be like this. Something should be done. And the older witch goes, we are doing it. Mm-hmm. Like there is, I found the idea of those people coming there and not be lonely, but being alcoholics. I was like, yeah, I'd be an alcoholic every day over being lonely.
Yeah.
And it's not paradisal, it's not pure, but it's 100% understandable, and it is a solution in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being with me on the journey of this episode of the pod and on its inciting incident part.
Oh, I really need to pee, man.
Yeah,
but
I can hear it in
thank
your
you,
voice.
Thank you for sharing that story because I do think it's. I've been with you for that journey, and you've really integrated that in a beautiful way. I think
I'm genuinely happier. Like that's Like I genuinely am. And look,
you
support really helped.
I have no clue what to do for his fucking bachelor party, but we'll see. No, I'm joking.
That's a good point. Just get shit faced.
Yeah. Just a bit of nice whiskey.
Fun Anthony is back.
Oh God, there was a Jekyll and Hyde kind of expression in your face. Right, should I? This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.